Good afternoon. I'm Jennifer Harmoning with the Burnsville Chamber of Commerce, and I'm pleased to be partnering today with the Savage Chamber of Commerce on our Meet the Candidate Forum. With that, I'm going to introduce our moderator, Brady Folkstedt with the Lakeview Bank. He is also chair of our Public Policy Committee for the Burnsville Chamber. Brady, take it away.
Thanks, Jennifer, and welcome to our friends from both the Burnsville and the Savage Chambers of Commerce. Today we have the forum for Senate District 55, was last round Senate District 56. And so invited to today's forum were Lindsey Port, the endorsed candidate from the DFL party, as well as Pam Myra from the Minnesota GOP party. Unfortunately, we rescheduled the debate. Lindsey was gracious in allowing us to do that as Pam came down with COVID-19. Unfortunately, she is still ill, and so we are moving ahead today as we had rescheduled. With that, basic terms of the forum is we'll be asking Lindsey the questions that we would have asked each of the candidates. She'll have a couple minutes to introduce herself and then run through the questions that the Burnsville Public Policy Committee deemed pertinent for this election cycle, and then tell us a little bit at the end why she is going to be the best candidate to receive the votes from our business community. With that, Lindsey, welcome. Glad you're here with us, and we'll just get started here briefly. Just a couple minutes to tell us about yourself and why you chose to run for the Senate District 55 seat.
Hi, everyone. Thank you, Jennifer, Brady, the Burnsville Chamber and the Savage Chamber for having this conversation. I'm Senator Lindsey Port. I live in Burnsville with my husband, Steve, and our 2 daughters. When I decided to run for the Senate in 2020, it was because I believe in governing with our community, and I didn't see that happening under our former senator. During my time in office, I've continued the work I've done in this district over the last decade, connecting with families, businesses, schools, and voters to listen to what our communities need, and then working in St. Paul to pass legislation that's informed with the voices of our communities. Over and over, I've heard from families and business owners that love living here. They're happy with our community, but they wish things were just a little bit easier. I believe that the legislature can help families by lowering the cost of healthcare and prescription drugs, by protecting reproductive freedom, by ending the tax on Social Security, by fully funding our schools to take the burden off local property taxes, and by passing paid family leave so that workers don't have to choose between caring for their family and a paycheck, and so that small businesses can compete with large corporations. I believe our government works best when it works in partnership with our communities, and that's what I will continue to do as your senator.
Thanks, Lindsey. Starting off with workers and families here in the Burnsville and Savage areas. Currently, we're seeing a shortage all over in all sectors of the economy. What can be done at the state level to assist in some of these shortage of workers and development of the workforce, as well as throughout the history of the United States, immigrants have generally been relied upon to fill some of these gaps in our workforce. How can we better integrate those folks into our communities?
It's a great question. There are a number of things that we can do to increase the number of workers in our economy. We can streamline the licensure process so that people can more easily transition across sectors. We can expand post-secondary enrollment options for high school students in high demand sectors that allow them to graduate with both a high school diploma and work credential. We can increase access to training and apprenticeship in the trades for high school and college, technical colleges. Also, over 40% of Minnesota adults have some sort of nonviolent criminal record. We can offer tax incentives to businesses that hire people who've been incarcerated to increase the worker pool. And finally, we have to pass paid family medical leave and ensure that reproductive freedom so that the right to choose if and when you start or grow your family is protected, and that you can take the time you need to care for your family without losing your paycheck. We really saw a majority of the people who left the workforce during the COVID-19 pandemic be women, and disproportionately women of color, and we really need to address that disparity.
Thank you. The next question really comes, you touched on a little bit in your introduction here, school funding. every single time an election cycle comes up, school funding is always an issue. Your thoughts, does the formula need to change for the funding? If so, what are your thoughts on that change? Or is there a way to increase the effectiveness of some of the public dollars that are deployed into the public schools?
Yeah, this is such an important question. It comes up every cycle because education is a core part of our community. Over the last 2.5 decades, we've moved away from our obligation to fund education at the state level and have transitioned that cost to local communities more and more. Now, property taxes are responsible for far too high a percentage of K-12 education funding, spreading that burden unfairly across our communities. Our seniors on fixed incomes and families struggling to make ends meet are footing the bill that the state has created. We're forced to pass levies and referendums to fill the gap that the state has let grow. We need to move back to ensuring that the state funds education rather than pushing it down to our communities. At the end of session, we had a bipartisan conference committee bill to do just that and to close the special education cross subsidy, but the Senate Republicans walked away. We cannot have a party in power that's going to walk out of the room in those last hard days. We need leaders who are willing to stay until we find a solution that works for our communities.
Thank you. The next thing is our communities and our workforce travels throughout the state. Getting there is an important topic. One of them that's been widely publicized in transportation is Minnesota Pollution Control Agency signed on to the California emission standards. California now has banned the sale of fossil fuel powered vehicles beginning in 2035. From your view, how does this affect Minnesota? And is this something you support moving forward?
So on this issue, everyone should have the freedom to choose the vehicle that makes sense for themselves and their families. And I do not support a ban on gas-powered cars. At the same time, climate change threatens the very things that Minnesotans love: our land, our air, our water, our children's future, and their ability to enjoy our rich outdoor traditions. The state's current clean car standards don't even take effect until 2024, and they will protect our environment and our health, increase customer choice, save Minnesotans money, and help grow our economy. Any further changes to this rule need to be really carefully considered, and I do not support banning gas-powered vehicles.
So those kind of lead into the next question here, and that's really where the Public Policy Committee came from. There's in the business community, we can generally deal with whatever is put out there as far as regulation and laws, as long as it's consistent, so we can have a long-range plan. How do we prevent large changes in regulations as administrations switch moving forward here? Specifically, the example was the Minnesota Pollution Control Agency and California emission standards.
Yeah, this is such an important question, and it really gets to the heart of the legislature's work. Most bills that we work on in the legislature, and nearly all of the bills that I work to get passed, are bipartisan. However, over the last few years, we've seen political gamemanship increase at the Capitol and across the country. There's been a lack of willingness to work together and get things done for Minnesotans. That pushes governors to take action on their own and through agencies. Our job as senators is to actually do the work to pass legislation and get it codified into law. This year, the Senate Republicans refused to pass the bills that they had a hand in negotiating in the final weeks of the session, preferring to hold back the surplus for our communities in hopes that they win this fall and can spend it how they want. Our communities cannot afford those political games. Businesses in Minnesota deserve more. We need a legislature that's going to actually do its job and consistently pass those bills and legislation regulations into law, so it's not left up to agencies to have to make these decisions because the legislature hasn't done it.
Thanks. I think that's moving things through the legislative process is what the business community is looking for. Kind of the last question here is, it feels a little bit more rapid fire with only one available participant, but crime is a big deal. It's becoming a bigger deal. We know that local businesses do better during periods of lower crime. Unfortunately, the state and the nation seem to be experiencing an increase in crime. What is it that could be done at the state level to assist our communities, Burnsville and Savage, with lowering the crime rate and criminal activity?
So funding local law enforcement is an important piece of this puzzle. That's why I've voted for a bill to spend $300 million into local jurisdictions to address crime in our communities in the way that our police and first responders need. That bill also invested in local community organizations that are doing the work on the ground to address concerns relevant to each community. Here in Burnsville and Savage, there is a deep need for after-school programs for kids to keep them involved in healthy activities and away from the increasingly dangerous opioid and fentanyl epidemic. That's why I support increased investments in the youth intervention programs. It's also why I supported several bills to address the increase in catalytic converter thefts. We have to ensure that law enforcement has the resources necessary to address crime, but also need to invest in the services necessary to give Minnesotans a fighting chance at addressing the root causes of those crimes.
Thank you. Wow, I do appreciate it. We've kept things moving along snappily here. You've been on time with each of the questions, so we appreciate that. Again, Lindsey, kind of in wrap up here and close, what makes you the best candidate for this particular office, the senator for District 55 for our business communities?
Well, first, I want to say thank you again, Brady, Jennifer, the Burnsville Chamber and the Savage Chamber for giving us this opportunity for voters to hear from me. I believe we have the best chance at a brighter future when our government works in relationship with our communities. That's what I've done in my first term. It's how I got the TIF district passed to help redevelop the Burnsville Center area and move forward the regulation necessary to begin the cleanup of the freeway landfill and dump. It's why I focus so much of my time on the affordable housing crisis, and it's why I chair the Reproductive Freedom Caucus. When we work together, stay in conversation, and actually listen to each other, we can make positive change for our communities. Thank you so much for taking time to talk with us today. I'm Senator Lindsey Port, and I hope to earn your support. You can learn more at lindseyportmn.com.
Thank you very much, Lindsey. Thank you again for joining us, and thank you for allowing the reschedule for Pam. Unfortunately, she was not able to join us today either. Everyone from the Savage and Burnsville Chambers, this was the Senate District 55 Forum. Your choices are Lindsey Port from the Minnesota DFL party that joined us today, as well as Pam Myra from the Minnesota GOP party. Thank you very much for your time. Thank you, candidates, for joining us as well. Jennifer, back to you.
Thank you, Brady, and thank you to our candidate for participating today. Thank you all for joining us for this Meet the Candidate Forum. These recordings are posted on our YouTube page and available for all offices impacting Burnsville. Thanks and have a great day.